Hey guys, welcome back. This is Brohian from the Gamer Emporium channel, doing mage guides for 91 Extreme RT. Now, I wasn't going to cover this one, but I think I'm going to go through it real quick with you. This one's Warlock. It's not really a good spec to show on a practice dummy because we have an ability called Death Store that can only be used when the enemy's below a certain point of health, and that can't happen with a practice dummy, so it's going to look like it doesn't do that much DPS, but it is indeed next to Pyro and Stormlist, next to Pyro and Stormlist for as far as DPS. If anything, I would have to say the two DPS raid specs I use most are either Pyromancer or aside from Pyrocon when I'm asked to, but the two main ones that I would use would be Pyromancer and then Warlock. Now Warlock's going to have a lot more mobility than Pyro, so it all depends on the fight. But let's take a look. 61 Warlock, fill that up all the way. 9 Necromancer, put 5 points in Death's Ally, and put 2 in Fresh Graves and 2 in Flesh Rot. 6 points in Harbinger, go for Eldritch Knowledge, 5 points of 5, and then Blazing Light for 1. Gives you that extra dot. So this spec is a little bit different than the one that I have up on the channel here, on both of our channels, previously from about, maybe... I would say maybe close to 8-9 months ago when I did them. So, but your buffs use Warlock Armor, Neddra's Might, and Lightning Blade or Lightning Charge or whatever it's called, whichever you prefer. I like seeing the blade because it looks cooler than my weapon half the time. So, now you have a couple things. I'm going to show you the macros first. With Warlock, you have this Warlock spam, which is kind of a newbie spam, but it works for me. I don't really feel like managing these 2 cooldowns or 3 cooldowns when I can put them in a macro and it almost does the same thing. I mean, I'm not a min-maxer by any means, so this works good enough, especially for those of you that are just learning. So you have this Warlock spam, which you'll grab out of the description, and then you have your refresher macro, which is Void Barrage and Persist. As far as your proc goes, you can use this macro for any proc that you would get. Consuming Agony always over Void Bolt, please. You can have an AoE one if you want, but I'm not really going to touch on that too much. And you have 3 DPS cooldowns. Well, one's toggled, Contaminate, that one should be used when the other 2 are off cooldown. But you have Empowered Darkness, which is a 40% increase, 1 minute cooldown, and you have Sacrifice Life Damage, which is a 20% increase for 30-second cooldown. And then you have Conflux, which adds damage depending on, it puts 10 stacks of Conflux on you, and as you use dots, then it takes 1 stack off for each dot and does damage for that stack. So main thing you gotta keep in mind here is that this is all about timing. You want to refresh your dots on the off tick, so like the odd number tick, any odd number tick, preferably 1 if you have a fast system and little lag. So when there's 1 second left, you want to refresh, because it will technically hit twice because it ticks on the odd dot and then it ticks when it's applied. So you can get a double tick every time you refresh. Otherwise, I mean, if you don't get it on the odd number tick, then it's not a huge deal. It's not like crazy DPS loss. There's just potential for more gain. The dot you want to start off with is Life Leech, then Defile, Atrophy, Dark Touch, Necrosis, and Blazing Light. Now, Blazing Light is the only one that will not refresh with any of your refreshers because it's not death damage, it's life damage. So, and it's from a completely different tree, but it's still, you know, a huge amount of damage if you don't use it. It's a huge DPS loss. So, the one you're watching to refresh is typically going to be Necrosis, but keep an open mind here. If you're looking at your target's portrait and you see him about to fall off and you gotta refresh him, just refresh him. You know, don't be like that. Radiate Death. You can actually spread Dark Touch and Neddra's Grasp up to 6 enemies. So that's good AoE. This spec works really well on Kayn and EE for when the bloods come up, while you're actually fighting Kayn, that is. And there's some, you can use a pet with this spec and use Desecrate, but it takes forever. It's not very good, so we're not even gonna we're not really even gonna show that. So let's get buffed up, and I'm just gonna start rotation right away. So I'm gonna cast Life Leech, Defile, Atrophy, Dark Touch, Necrosis, Blazing Light, get that proc, and then you want to go right into a refresher and make sure you hit your Conflux. Then go into your spam, it'll start applying your cooldowns, and watch your Necrosis here. Once it's at 1 second left, refresh, and make sure you manually refresh your Blazing Light. If you don't, that'll fall off, big DPS loss. So here's our next cooldown. We're coming down on seconds again here, so 1 second left, refreshed, and we have a proc, so we use that too. And reapply Blazing Light at utmost convenience. Proc should go over Blazing Light. Proc should go over anything except letting your dots fall off like I just did there. So I get a little bit rusty apparently, but it's not so bad. So you're seeing me do 14k on this practice dummy. Again, this is without being able to use Death's Door. If I were able to use Death's Door, this number would probably be closer to 18k or so on the practice dummy. But main thing is, give yourself some time. Maybe try starting to learn by refreshing at 5 seconds, but I wouldn't go any further than that. 5 seconds is pushing it, and you're going to end up letting it fall off if you try that. So, and still maintaining about 15k, and it's very mobile. You can run around, do whatever you want. You just won't cast Void Bolts. Now, Void Bolts are a main part of it, so you want to stand still as much as possible. But not a huge deal. You can run while using Void Barrage. Obviously, Persist you can run with. So, it's not a bad spec. Actually, it's one of the best out there. So, make sure that you guys are trying this. And this is definitely not one of those specs that you're going to learn in 5 or 10 minutes. This is going to take a lot of practice because you have to pay attention to what you're doing, and you have to pay attention to all your dots here on the bar and make sure they're not going to fall off. Otherwise, you're going to be up shit crick. That seems to be my saying lately. You're going to be up shit crick if you let them fall off. Your DPS is going to be done, and it's going to suck. So, now what's kind of cool, I'm going to show you Radiate Death. So we're going to click this, and boom, now you got dots everywhere. This can be used to double dot. So if you want to double dot, you switch and apply all the dots here. And then you come back over here, and you can refresh here. Switch back here, you can refresh there. Let's try to get all the dots back up. Let's see. Can't refresh, so we're going to use Salvage Corruption, my Salvage Corruption macro, and reapply, and eventually I got 2 sets of dots going, which is kind of cool. Very cool, actually. Very unique spec. So now we're doing 16k with dual dots. So, and I forgot to actually mention that macro. Where is it? My switching macro. So you can have it mouse over. I do that for convenience, but a lot of times if it's going to be on the target you have selected, so it doesn't really make that much of a difference. So I use mouse over Salvage Corruption, which picks up the dots off the enemy, and then you cast Deathly Pall on a different enemy, and it drops those dots on it. So it's pretty cool. So that's Warlock in a nutshell. And unfortunately, I'm sorry you cannot see Death's Door. So on that note, this wraps up Warlock video. So thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, comment. Have a nice day.